Hi everybody, my name is Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm the author of 3 books. My first book is called Evolve Your Brain, The Science of Changing Your Mind. My second book is called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One. My last book is called You Are the Placebo, Making Your Mind Matter. My interest is to use science as a language to help people understand spiritual principles and bridge science and spirituality so that they have within their reach all the tools to begin to make necessary changes in their own personal lives. In the last video, we talked about how we can take information, learn that information, and produce physical changes in our brain. But once we learn that intellectual, philosophical information, the next most important thing to do is to apply that information, to personalize it, and to demonstrate it. And if we can align our behaviors and our intentions, our mind and body, we are going to have a new experience. Experience then enriches the circuits of our philosophical information, and then the brain makes a chemical, and we begin to feel the results of our efforts. We feel more powerful, we feel more loving, we feel more compassionate, we feel more like a leader. And that's when we're teaching our body chemically to understand what our mind is intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experiences for the body. And if you can repeat anything over and over again, it's going to become a skill. It's going to become a habit. It means you've practiced it so many times that your mind and body are merging. In other words, your body knows how to do it as well as your mind. That's when you are innately embodying that information and it becomes who you are. You've practiced it so many times that you don't even have to think about it. So imagine taking spiritual, philosophical, scientific principles about possibility, about creating the life that you want, about healing yourself from certain diseases or certain conditions, and understanding then that you can signal new genes in new ways and rewire your brain. You can literally have your thoughts affect your body and your feelings affect your brain. And begin to understand that if you begin to apply these things, you could begin to see the results within your body and within your life. In this video, I want to talk about how your personality creates your personal reality and how your thoughts are intimately connected to the life that you live right now. Before I do that, I just want to take a minute and thank everybody for their comments since the last video. I love the people that are actually applying it to their life. The most difficult part of all of this is making the time to do it. And when you and I begin to make the time to measure our own changes in our life, now we're no longer being philosophers now. We're beginning to initiate that information and we begin to master it over time. Most people in their life wait for crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis or loss before they finally make up their mind to change. But the new science gives people permission to begin to change in a state of joy and inspiration, in a state of pain and suffering. And so it is my hope, my message, that you don't wait for tragedy or crisis, that you do it because you can understand that you can enrich your life even more. So, in the last couple years, one of the things that we've noticed is that common people just like you are doing the uncommon. They're healing themselves of diseases, they're creating big changes in their life, they're healing themselves of past traumas and scars that keep them stuck in the same routine patterns. I was in a movie 10 years ago called What the Bleep Do We Know? 14 scientists and researchers were making an attempt to explain the nature of reality. Since that movie, in the last 10 years, many people asked the same questions when we did conferences all around the world. The 2 questions were this: that information is really great, but how do we apply that information? And if it really means that in order for us to change our mind to produce a change in our life, why is it so hard to change? So in the last few years, we've been teaching conferences and workshops around the world. And one of the cool things we've been doing is bringing scientists and researchers right into our workshops to measure change in the brain, to measure change in the body, to measure genetic changes, to measure changes in the energy of the room, to measure changes in the energy field around people's bodies. And I can tell you without a doubt that you're more powerful than you know. And that what makes it so cool is that you don't have to be a Buddhist monk. You don't have to be someone who's dedicated to any religious doctrine. You don't have to have 40,000 hours of meditation. And once you understand the science of how this all works, and we can demystify it and then give you the proper instruction on how to apply it. That we can take information that can ultimately lead to transformation. And what we found over the course of the last 2.5 years, people really have the skill sets, once they're taught how to do it, to really begin to embody this information. So I want to talk to you a little bit about a concept about your thoughts creating your life. If you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, that your thoughts create your life, let's examine the thoughts that you think. Now you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day. Out of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts that you think in one day, 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. So the same thoughts will always lead to the same choices. The same choices will always lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors will always create the same experiences, and the same experiences always produce the same emotions. And those same emotions then drive our very same thoughts. And our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our neurohormones, and even our genetic expression stays exactly equal to how you think, how you act, and how you feel. Now, how you think, how you act, and how you feel is called your personality. And your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. So then if you believe just the slightest bit in this idea that your personality creates your personal reality, and you wanted to change your personal reality, that means you'd have to begin to change your personality by thinking about what you've been thinking about and change it. You begin to become conscious of your unconscious habits and behaviors and modify them. And then look at the emotions that keep you connected to past experiences and decide if those emotions belong in your future. You see, most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. We literally have to become someone else. So reason this with me. A habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through frequent repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times that your body knows how to do it as well as your mind. So if you're thinking the same thoughts 90% of the time as the day before, you're demonstrating the same behaviors 90% of the time, and you're embracing the same emotions as the day before 90% of the time, over time you begin to fire the same circuits in your brain in the same sequences, in the same patterns, in the same combinations. Now there's a principle in neuroscience that says that nerve cells that fire together wire together. So as you think the same thoughts that lead to the same choices, that of course produce the same behaviors, that lead to the same experiences, that ultimately produce the same emotions, that in time you begin to hardwire your brain into the same finite pattern. Now that box in your brain, there's no literal box in your brain, but that finite signature ultimately becomes your identity. So then most people, by the time they're 35 years old, become a set of memorized behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that function like a subconscious computer program. 95% of who you are by the time you're 35 is a memorized state of being in which you've done something so many times that your body now is doing it better than your brain. So you may say, I can't consciously remember a phone number, or I forgot my PIN number. But then you can walk over to the phone and look at the keypad, and all of a sudden your finger will dial the number. So what does that mean? You've practiced it so many times that your body knew how to do it better than your brain. That's where 95% of who we are exists. So here comes the part that's the most important. Every time you learn something new, you add a new stitch to the three-dimensional tapestry of your gray matter. And if you begin to think about what you learned, you're causing your brain to fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind, because mind is the brain in action. So we could say then that new thoughts should lead to new choices. And new choices should lead to new behaviors. And new behaviors should create new experiences. And new experiences then should create new emotions. And those new emotions should inspire new thoughts. And that's called evolution. Now here's the difficulty. Because the process of change then requires you becoming conscious of your unconscious self. So here's your old self, and here's your new self. And let's just say that over a period of time, you've become unconsciously addicted emotionally to suffering. And all of your thoughts are equal to those emotional states, and all of your behaviors are also equal to that emotion. And you think the same thoughts every day, and you demonstrate the same behaviors by complaining and blaming and making excuses for yourself. And those emotions of suffering lead to guilt and feeling bad, and you no longer want to get up and do anything. You become inspired. And all of a sudden, you become conscious that you are in that state. So now, you decide that in that moment, you're no longer going to think the same way, you're no longer going to act the same way, and you're no longer going to feel the same way. And so the first 2 hours goes by and everything's going really well. But now remember, you've conditioned your body to become the mind of that victim or that mind of suffering. And all of a sudden now, as you begin to interrupt that chemical continuity between your brain and your body, the body starts sending signals back to the brain. And all of a sudden, you start to hear little voices in your head, chatter that says, why don't you start tomorrow? This is uncomfortable. This doesn't feel right. It's my mother's fault that I'm this way. I'll never change. And that's the body looking to unseat the mind and return back to its familiar state. The hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you decide to no longer think the same way, make the same choice, act the same way, create the same experience, or live by the same emotion, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There is going to be a certain amount of uncertainty and unpredictability. And the moment you feel uncomfortable, you just stepped into the river of change. Now, most people, the moment they feel uncomfortable, they return back to the familiar state of the mind and body. They start thinking the same way, acting the same way, feeling the same way, and they say, this feels right. No, in fact, that feels familiar. Now, going from the old self to the new self is the neurological, is the chemical, is the biological, is the hormonal, and even genetic death of the old self. That void, that place of uncertainty, that unknown, is the perfect place to create it. And if you and I can become comfortable in that unknown and begin to decide who we do want to be. In other words, many people say when they're in that unknown, I can't predict my future. This doesn't feel right. Well, the best way to predict your future is to create it, not in the known, but in the unknown. So what if you said now, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? What behaviors do I want to demonstrate? And if you were to close your eyes and begin to think about how you are going to act, the mere act of mentally rehearsing who you're going to be begins to install the neurological circuits in your brain to look like the experience has already occurred. Now, what that means is that the brain is primed in its circuitry to no longer be living in the past, but now living in the future. And what if you said, how would greatness live today? What would be the greatest expression of myself? Can I teach my body emotionally what that future could feel like now? And if you were able to cultivate the emotional state ahead of the actual experience, the emotion then that you're creating of wealth, the emotion that you're creating of leadership, the emotion that you're creating of patience, the emotion that you're creating of a new relationship and love, now means that your body as the unconscious mind does not know the difference between an actual experience in your life that creates an emotion and an emotion that you can create by thought alone. To the body, it's exactly the same. And your body then is all of a sudden emotionally living in the future instead of living in the past. So here's the question. Can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet, but you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain is literally changed to look like the experience has already occurred? The latest research in neuroscience says that you can change your brain just by thinking differently. And can you begin to select a new possibility that already exists in the quantum field and begin to emotionally embrace that future reality to such a degree that your body as the unconscious mind begins to believe it's living in that future reality in the present moment, and you're signaling new genes in new ways so that your body begins to change to look like the experience has already occurred? So reason this. If your brain and body are physically changed, there's physical evidence to look like the experience has already occurred, this is the moment to relax, because the experience is going to find you, and it's going to come in a way that you least expect, that surprises you, and leaves no doubt that what you did inside of you produced some effect outside of you. And when you can correlate the changes you've made inside of you with the effect that you produced outside of you, you'll pay attention to what you did and you'll do it again. And that is called human empowerment. And there isn't a person on the planet that's so special to be excluded from this equation. So the process of change then requires unlearning and relearning. It requires breaking the habit of the old self and reinventing a new self. What we say in neuroscience, pruning synaptic connections and sprouting new connections. Unmemorizing emotions that are stored in the body and then reconditioning the body to a new mind and to a new emotion. In other words, move out of the past and into the future, to deprogram and to reprogram, to lose your mind and create a new one. And people around the world are beginning to do the work, going from the old self to the new self. So what's the beauty behind this? I invite you to take out a piece of paper and write down 2 thoughts that have been slipping behind the scenes of your awareness that you've not noticed, and become conscious of those unconscious thoughts. Decide 2 behaviors that no longer belong in your future and become so conscious of those behaviors and habits that you would never go unconscious again. And look at those emotions that keep you anchored to the past and decide if those emotions belong in your future and become so conscious of those emotions that you wouldn't fall to a lower level the remainder of your day. And then decide 2 thoughts you do want to fire and wire in your brain. 2 behaviors that you're going to demonstrate and rehearse them in your mind so that you're priming your brain and activating the circuits so that when you get up, you'll naturally do them without effort. Now here's the key though. You can't get up as the same person who sat down. You have to get up feeling differently. Which means then, you can't wait for your healing to feel wholeness. You can't wait for your abundance to feel wealthy. You can't wait for the mystical moment to feel awe. In fact, you have to feel awe for the mystical moment to occur. You have to feel love for a new relationship to show up. You have to feel empowered in order to have success. You have to feel wholeness before your healing can occur. And most importantly, you have to feel abundant before your wealth can actually appear. Now, when your brain and body are literally changed to look like the event has occurred, this is when the event finds you. So the word meditation, which we'll discuss in the next video, means to become familiar with. To become so familiar with your unconscious states of mind and body that you would never go unconscious again, and then keep firing and wiring new circuits in your mind and emotionally conditioning your body till it begins to become familiar to you. So, I invite you over the course of the next few days before the next video to ask yourself this simple question when you wake up in the morning. What is the greatest ideal of myself that I can be today? And decide who you want to be when you open your eyes. And don't get up until you feel like that person. And your job then is to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day. And if you do, get ready, because something unusual will happen in your life. That's the law. So I want to invite you to continue sending your comments, continue adding any things that you'd like to say and share. If you're doing the work, if you're applying it, let us know the small miracles, I don't care how small they are, how they're beginning to appear in your life. In the next video, I'll talk about how to demystify meditation so you understand exactly what you're doing and why. And when you understand the what and the why, the how becomes easier. I hope to see you again.